Thanks a lot for sticking towards the end. Good to see you. LDV Vision Summit. You guys having fun? Everybody's like, I'm totally fun. No, the people who are actually having fun are the people that are drinking out front. It's a total party out there right now, and you all are missing it. I mean, Kendrick Lamar just showed up. They're popping Cristal. It is out of control right outside those doors. And being mindful that I'm the only thing between the presentation of a gigantic check and that really fun experience, I thought we might just strap ourselves in, try to blow through this thing in about 8 minutes, if that sounds cool with y'all. Sound like a plan? Cool. So we're talking about business models, which is kind of unusual for me because I'm a developer. But we're not talking about B2C. We're not talking about B2B. We're talking about the new jam. The new jam is B2D, right? The direct-to-developer business model for software companies that are building tools. And as hokey as that three-letter acronym is, I am truly convicted that this will be the business model for every significant hard tech company that gets created for the rest of our lives. And it is a business model that I think is especially important to folks that are working on computer vision. And we don't have enough time to give a complete view of the evidence around that. But some of the basis from a macroeconomic point of view is basically the IMF says over the course between now and 2020, financial wealth is going to grow at 10x of production globally, which leads a lot of people, including bank capital, to make the assertion that power is going to shift from owners of capital to owners of good ideas. I personally believe that the good ideas are only going to be realized with spectacular software. And that presents a really interesting problem and a really interesting business opportunity, mostly because, as you all know, the demand and the supply of software developers globally is completely out of whack. The Bureau of Labor Statistics here in the United States suggests that the number of vacancies for software developers is going to be 30%. However, in the entire Western world, we're only producing 3 to 4% more developers every year. This leads me to conclude, and would love to talk to you about it more over beer, that the story point, that is to say the hour of software developer time, has eclipsed the American dollar in terms of importance as the most valuable resource of the 21st century company. If you believe that is true, if you believe the story point is more valuable to a company right now than a dollar, folks that are making developer tools are selling the pickaxes for the gold rush of software. And when you think about its import for you as a scientist working in the computer vision field, I think it's particularly compelling, and I'd love to tell you a little bit more about it. So my name is Rob Spectre. I'm a hacker here in the best borough in the greatest city in the world, which is Brooklyn, New York. And over the course of the past 7 years, I had the privilege of serving as a leader in a couple of organizations that were dedicated to delivering software products in this direct-to-developer model. Boxee, which was a video startup that had an app platform because it was 2009 and everybody had an app platform. And most recently, Twilio, which was the very first API company to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And so the three elements I would like to talk about with the B2D model and the things that you need to execute well on in order to see success are, in order of importance, your product, marketing, and your sales. Product, foundational, it's the thing that you sell to the customers. Marketing is the way that you inspire and equip developers to use that product. And then sales, the way that you make money to realize the actual value that your software presents. And hopefully, if you do those three things well, you're going to end up with a brand spanking new unicorn, which would be grand. 5 minutes left, folks, and then we're going to have some beer. Product, you're going to hear from a lot of folks when they're talking about developer products that the thing needs to be easy to use, it needs to be intuitive, it needs to flow. Basically, it needs to be like every other piece of software you make, right? Like all those kind of adjectives for the sake of a developer-focused company absolutely still apply because they're just the table stakes for any software company. I mean, you're not making fidget spinners, right? Like it's software. The shit needs to work. Three things that I think are non-obvious for developer tools that are important are, one, the difficulty of the problem domain that the software tool is addressing, right? With any integration with an external piece of software, the developer is making a determination of whether or not the problem that they're trying to address is difficult enough for he or she to address him or herself, right? If the product is too simple, if the domain is too simple, they'll just figure out an implementation themselves, right? We had a fellow on here earlier that was like making radar with like coffee cans in his backyard. That, I think, is really, really exemplary of the kind of DIY ethic that exists with this particular demographic. Another bit that's really important to your product, can't harp on this enough, utility-based pricing. Pay only for what you use. Most API companies, when they come out of the gate, sell what I refer to as t-shirt pricing, right? They have a subscription model where they have small, medium, large, and then you should talk to our sales team, right? The problem with t-shirt-based pricing is that you're leaving most of the value of your service on the plate. Honestly, I truly believe if Heroku had utility-based pricing instead of t-shirt-based pricing, they would have sold for $1 billion instead of $200 million. That is exactly how much value that they were leaving on the table. Now, the key to getting the utility-based pricing right is that you pay only for what you use and that the pricing model is free for development, right? If you use Twilio, for example, absolutely free to sign up. We never charge you to swipe a credit card. However, you can only use the product with one phone number, and there's a little bug at the end that says this is powered by Twilio. If Heroku would have taken a similar example, used a utility-based pricing model, and charged for custom domains, oh, biscuits, would Salesforce not ever be able to buy that thing because it would be ridiculously valuable. Utility-based pricing is the best way, is clearly the model, clearly the model that works for this particular type of product. Next bit is talking about 5-minute hello world. So, and this is coming from experience. We shipped a lot of products at Twilio. Some of them had the ability to do hello world in 5 minutes. Some did not. The ones that were successful were the ones that had a 5-minute hello world. The ones that weren't successful were ones that did not. And what do I mean by 5-minute hello world? That's not the suggestion that you can build an entire application in 5 minutes. What you need to have the ability to do is put some arbitrary input into the thing and get something back. If you can accomplish that in 5 minutes, you're well on your way to success in your developer-based product. The thing that's probably going to get you there the fastest if you're starting anywhere is making sure that there's a cozy interface for the developer, right? So Twilio was a web-based API, but this interface, this HTTP protocol-based interface, was not really our product. Our product was the object model of the helper libraries that we shipped to developers, right? The thing that developers were spending their time in was the code that used native objects in their language of choice. And that, in my view, was a really critical element. Now, the natural problem is like, where do you start when you're talking about, there are like 13 different server-side programming languages that are really popular right now. I can tell you from our experience, definitely just choose one and do it well, and then move on from there. The one that we happened to choose was PHP. And before you judge, I would just like to remind you that this was 2008. And just like the NFL, when they made the selection of Tom Petty to serve as the halftime entertainment, it was 2008, and we all did things that we weren't proud of. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. So when I look at documentation, I have a very different reaction than most people. When most people take a look at documentation, they see the prescriptive objects and methods that you need to invoke in order to properly integrate with the API that you're laying out. When I look at documentation, I see an ATM. On Twilio.com, Twilio.com/docs is where all the money got made, right? A person that took a look at the documentation was 9 times more likely to sign up. They were 5 times more likely to give us a credit card, and they were 7 times more likely to become a new paying customer. That is to say, they were 7 times more likely to ultimately give us $5, right? And when you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, right? We got a lot of software developers in this crowd. When you're integrating with another external service, you really spend 20% of your time working on the integration, right? You spend 80% of your time reading the goddamn thing and trying to figure out how it works, right? So when you think about your documentation, you're really thinking about your marketing. Your documentation is your marketing when you're a developer-based tool. And making sure that people can find it is super important. Easy tip on just jacking up your Google Juice for the documentation for your product, because these can be hard things to get them to rank for certain search phrases. Just go to Stack Overflow, find things that are related to your domain, link to your documentation in those answers. Those answers are going to get voted up, and you're going to get crazy Google Juice because Stack Overflow has crazy Google Juice. So we went to Stack Overflow. We found every single programming language that we supported, found every single question about sending an SMS from it, answered it with a link to the Twilio documentation, and now if you search like Python send SMS, guess what comes up, y'all? Our documentation. And a lot of people are like, Rob, shouldn't we send them to a product page? I'm like, no. The only person that is getting there is a developer. Sweet Jesus, get the thing in front of them that can make them use your product, and then you will ultimately win. The reason this has a multiplicative effect is also because of how developers use online resources. This is from an internal survey. Please don't take a picture of it and tweet it because it was internal to Twilio. But if you take a look at the left-hand side, the question was, how likely are you to use the following sources for your work? The one that people said most frequently was Stack Overflow. It is like the Bible for developers. It is where Jesus lives. Think beyond your reference documentation. Whenever you make documentation, and I'm certainly guilty of this myself, basically I just put doc strings at the end of every method, call it a day, ship it through Sphinx, and I'm good. Reference documentation is not the documentation that is going to be the most effective for getting people to use your product for the first time. That documentation is example code. And the secret with example code is to make sure it's copy-pastable, all right? And there are a few different elements to that. First, you have to make sure that you have some sort of mechanism that indicates to the user that copy and paste works in this particular place. Make sure that you have all your dependencies declared at the top of every single snippet. Like, you will never see a snippet on any of Twilio's documentation that just has the definition of a function. You'll have the entire snippet that's required to make it run in a file, right? And lastly, add anything that you need at the end to make sure that it can be run for the command line immediately. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, she is all upset because someone didn't declare their dependencies and their code examples. Now she's all grumpy. That's not what you want to have happen. Developers are elusive, so you got to go see them where they live. The reason why I think this is important basically has to do with skateboarders. Here's a funny picture of a skateboarder taking a diver. And then talking a little bit about why it's important to go to these conferences. The next two items of preference for all the developers that we surveyed in their determination on whether or not to use a product were, one, a recommendation from a developer they trusted, and two, a product demonstration. The reason why field marketing, actually going to conferences and hackathons and meetups and all the places where developers congregate, the reason why that's important is because it's the perfect counterpiece to the online work that you're doing with your documentation. Last thing, talk about sales. Then we're done. Are you guys ready for the last one? Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about sales. So whenever I talk to folks about the business to developer model, invariably the first question, and I guarantee you I'm going to get this question today when we're all out there drinking and having a great time, is, okay, that's cool, Rob, for going to hackathons and getting in front of the hoodie hackers, but how do I get into the enterprise, right? It's a natural question, right? But what they're really saying is, like, how do I make money with an API, right? And there's the presumption that getting a bunch of influencers on Hacker News to use your thing doesn't necessarily translate to adoption in larger companies that are going to give you a ton of revenue. And the reaction that most companies that I've talked to have when they're trying to get into the enterprise is they go out and they get a big slick-backed, gun-slinging head of sales. And they bring him into the organization. This cat usually was an EVP at Salesforce. There's like 1,000 of these motherfuckers. It's like, I can't believe how many executive vice presidents of sales there are at Salesforce. They must just like turn them over every month. It's ridiculous. These people are really, really immaculately well-dressed, really are only looking for a big expense account. They have really low handicaps. And invariably, when this person is introduced to the API company in 8 to 10 months' time, it doesn't even take a year, just in 8 to 10 months' time, you look around the ship and it looks, oh, darn it. Well, this is an animated GIF of the bridge of the Enterprise and a big thing that says shit over and over again. That's a real letdown. I'll show you the GIF outside. It's really, really funny. But basically, after 8 to 10 months, you realize that the cart's going off the rails. Then you fire that guy, you fire that entire team, try to hire another one. I mean, at Twilio, we did this like 3 times. Candidly, it was just like a real mess. And the reason why people do it is not because they're dumb. They're not at all, right? Because there are a ton of really successful companies that have been based on this model that sell really hard tech, right? Like, we're like, oh, well, we're a developer company. Like, you know, developers use Oracle. We should use the Oracle model to sell Twilios, right? And maybe we'll be as successful as they are. And the impulse to go to historic enterprise sales is the correct one. But the paradigm you need to be thinking about is not Oracle. The paradigm you need to be thinking about is Cisco, right? A consultative sales model that was really focused on sales engineering, right? And there are just a few bits here that are really important. Cisco reps were not experts on the Cat 6K, right? They were not experts on like their core router. What they were experts on were government. They were experts on pharmaceutical companies. They were experts on e-commerce, right? They were use case experts that were focused and looked a lot like and talked a lot like the people they were selling to, right? This isn't a solution, right? We weren't selling call centers, right? We were going to places where high volumes of voice and messaging traffic were going to occur, and we picked people that looked like those folks to talk to them, right? If we were going into a political campaign, we sent a person that helped run messaging for Obama for America, right? When we were trying to go into a call center, we sent somebody that used to sell session border controllers, right? Like, these aren't folks that are knowledgeable about a particular product. They're knowledgeable about domain. Then we paired each single one of those folks with 3 sales engineers. We tried a whole bunch of different ratios. This is a golden one. Just trust me, it works. 1 sales rep, 3 sales engineers. It's basically inverted for any other software product that you're going to find. And finally, just kill the customer support. Right? Rackspace is the absolute perfect example of this. You kill the customer support, you're going to kill your sales. And just remember, enterprise developers are not aliens, right? They're not these strange creatures from another planet. I had a person in developer relations that I talked to last week said, oh, well, enterprise is a whole different animal. It's not, really. They're all developers. They're all geeks. They all get excited about the same stuff. They all want to hear about the radar being built with coffee cans. They totally do. They read different things. They go to different conferences. They use different programming languages, but they're still nerds, right? The same things that you use for the Ruby developers, you can adapt for the .NET developers and win. So that's all the time I have. The StoryPoint is the most valuable resource of the 21st century. If you believe that, starting a developer tools company is something you should do tomorrow. And in order to do that, you need to get the product marketing and sales right. And getting this right is really, really difficult to learn. Probably harder to learn than learning how to write code. But I think you will find, if you give it a try, serving developers in this capacity, making developers your primary customer, is absolutely the most rewarding set of customers that I've ever worked with, and I think you will too. Guys, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.